My name is Melissa Hudson, and at 28, I was living the life I'd worked so hard to build. A successful accountant with my own apartment in Chicago, I thought I'd finally escaped my family's manipulative grip. Then came that call from my father. His voice cold and demanding as he delivered his ultimatum: pay my sister Ashley's $50,000 gambling debt, or she'd be cut off from the family. Little did he know, his ultimatum would backfire spectacularly. I never imagined that conversation would be the last time I spoke to my family for 3 years. Before I share how I vanished from my toxic family's radar, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and subscribe if you've ever had to make a difficult choice to protect your peace. Growing up as the eldest daughter in the Hudson household meant one thing: responsibility. From the age of 10, I was the one who set the alarm clock, made breakfast, and ensured homework was completed, not just mine, but my younger sister Ashley's too. While I maintained a 4.0 GPA and worked part-time jobs throughout high school, Ashley was encouraged to focus on cheerleading, social events, and her appearance. My parents made no secret of their favoritism. Ashley was blessed with our mother's honey blonde hair, startling blue eyes, and natural charisma. I took after my father's side, practical, dependable, with unremarkable brown hair and a serious disposition. "Your sister needs extra attention," my mother would say. "She's sensitive." "You're so self-sufficient, Melissa." Self-sufficient was a polite way of saying I was on my own. When I needed new glasses in 8th grade, I babysit for 3 months to afford them. When Ashley wanted contact lenses that same year, they were purchased immediately, no questions asked. The pattern continued throughout our adolescence. At 16, I saved for 6 months to buy a used Toyota Corolla with 120,000 miles on it. When Ashley turned 16, our parents gifted her a brand new Honda Civic. 3 months later, she totaled it at a party. They replaced it within a week. Family takes care of family, my father lectured when I expressed concern about their enabling. He was a successful construction company owner who had built his business through discipline and hard work, yet somehow these values only applied to me. My mother, a part-time real estate agent and full-time enabler, would add, "Ashley just hasn't found her path yet." By 18, I'd mapped my escape route: an accounting scholarship to the University of Illinois. I graduated summa cum laude, secured an entry-level position at a prestigious firm in Chicago, and began building my career. By 28, I'd been promoted twice and was finally seeing financial stability after years of paying off student loans. My apartment in Wicker Park wasn't fancy, but it was mine. A one-bedroom with exposed brick walls and tall windows that flooded the space with morning light. I'd furnished it piece by piece: a second-hand leather sofa found on Facebook Marketplace, a dining table restored from a thrift store, bookshelves built with my own hands. Each item represented independence hard-won. Meanwhile, Ashley had dropped out of 3 different colleges, moved back home, and cycled through retail jobs she quit whenever accountability became uncomfortable. Any crisis in her life became a family emergency requiring immediate resolution, usually financial. The calls had become predictable. "Melissa, your sister needs help with her car payment." "Melissa, Ashley got evicted and needs first and last month's rent." "Melissa, be reasonable, it's only money." At first, I complied out of guilt and obligation. $500 for car repairs. $800 for a security deposit. $1,200 when she was short on rent. Small enough amounts that I could rationalize them as one-time helps, large enough that they delayed my financial goals repeatedly. The last small loan I'd given Ashley was $2,000 for a certification program she swore would launch her career in event planning. She dropped out after 2 weeks. When I asked about repayment, my father called to remind me that scorekeeping isn't what families do. I'd finally paid off my student loans 6 months before that fateful call. For the first time, I was building a modest savings account with dreams of eventually purchasing a condo. I'd started dating again after years of focusing solely on career advancement. I was healing from the financial anxiety that had shadowed me since childhood. My therapist had recently commended my progress in establishing boundaries. You're not responsible for adult family members' choices, she reminded me during our biweekly sessions. I nodded, believing I was finally implementing this wisdom. Then came the phone call that would test every boundary I thought I'd established. It was a Wednesday evening in October. I'd just returned from a demanding day of client meetings and was heating leftover pasta primavera when my phone lit up with "Dad" on the caller ID. I hesitated before answering, intuition already raising alarms. "Melissa." My father's voice carried its usual authoritative tone, no greeting necessary. "We have a situation with your sister." I closed my eyes, mentally calculating my available funds and how much I could spare. "What's going on?" "Ashley's in trouble." "Serious trouble." A pause, the kind that preceded unwelcome news. "She owes money." "A lot of money." I lowered myself onto a kitchen stool. "How much are we talking about?" $50,000. The microwave beeped in the silence that followed. My pasta forgotten, I struggled to comprehend the figure. "That's impossible. Where would she even get that kind of debt?" My father cleared his throat. "Gambling. Apparently, it's been going on for about a year. Online at first, then casinos. She tried to win back what she lost and he trailed off. And it spiraled," I finished, a wave of nausea rising. "Dad, I don't have that kind of money. I just paid off my student loans. I'm finally building savings." "You make good money at that firm. You have access to credit." His tone hardened. "These aren't nice people she owes, Melissa. They're threatening her." "Then she needs to go to the police," I suggested. A bitter laugh. "And have her record ruined?" "Your mother and I have worked too hard to let that happen." "What about your savings? Your emergency fund?" I knew my parents had substantial retirement accounts and investment properties. "We're asset-rich but cash-poor right now. The market's down, and we've got 3 property renovations happening simultaneously. Liquidating would mean massive losses." The practiced ease of his response suggested this wasn't a new conversation. "How convenient," I muttered before I could stop myself. "Excuse me? Your sister could be in physical danger, and you're concerned about your savings account?" "She's family, Melissa. She needs help." "She needs consequences," I countered, surprising myself with my directness. "This isn't a few $1,000s. This is life-altering money you're asking for." "It's just money," he dismissed. "You don't have children or responsibilities. Ashley's going through a really tough time right now. The stress has triggered her anxiety. I have plenty of responsibilities. Mortgage-sized student loans I just finished paying off after 7 years. Retirement I'm trying to save for. Health insurance premiums that increase every year. Just because I don't broadcast my struggles doesn't mean they don't exist." "Your sister would help you if the situation were reversed," my father said, his tone suggesting the discussion was nearing its conclusion. "No, she wouldn't," I replied, years of resentment crystallizing into certainty. "She's never helped anyone but herself." I heard shuffling, then my mother's voice came on the line, tearful and high-pitched. "Melissa, sweetie, we're not asking forever. Just until we can rearrange some investments. 3 months, maybe 4. Mom, this is enabling, not helping. Ashley needs professional addiction treatment, not a bailout. We can address that after this immediate danger passes," she insisted. She promised this is rock bottom. "She's joined Gamblers Anonymous already. Let me guess, she just joined this week when she couldn't pay her debt." The silence confirmed my suspicion. "How do you know this is even the full amount?" "Addicts lie, Mom." "I can't believe how cold you've become," my mother whispered. "Is this what that big city job has done to you? Made you forget what family means?" My father returned to the phone. "Here's the situation. Your sister needs $50,000 by the end of next week. Your mother and I are prepared to help her rebuild her life once this debt is clear. If you refuse to help, that's your choice, but understand what that choice means." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying family stands together or not at all. If you can't support your sister through this crisis, then perhaps you don't value this family as much as we thought. Actions have consequences, Melissa." The irony of his statement, applied to me but never to Ashley, wasn't lost. "Are you threatening to cut me off if I don't pay her gambling debts?" "I'm stating facts. This is a defining moment. You have until Friday to make your decision." The call ended abruptly. I sat motionless in my kitchen, the microwave's digital clock blinking as minutes passed. Eventually, I reached for my phone and called the one person I trusted implicitly. Rachel? Can you come over? I need to talk. My voice cracked as the enormity of the situation finally hit me. An hour later, Rachel sat across from me at my small dining table, her expression cycling through shock, outrage, and disbelief as I recounted the conversation. They're blackmailing you, she concluded, pushing her red curls behind her ears in frustration. Emotional blackmail, but blackmail nonetheless. Is it wrong that part of me considered paying? I asked, ashamed. Just to keep the peace? The peace has already been disturbed, and not by you, Rachel pointed out. $50,000 isn't keeping the peace, it's paying ransom for your place in a family that doesn't value you equally. As we talked late into the night, a terrifying yet liberating thought began to form. What if I simply removed myself from the equation? What if the solution wasn't fighting against their manipulation, but walking away from it entirely? I think I need to set a boundary they can't ignore or override, I said finally. Rachel nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. 2 days after my father's ultimatum, an insistent knocking interrupted my Saturday morning coffee ritual. Through the peephole, I spotted Ashley's familiar blonde hair and practiced pout. Against better judgment, I opened the door. Finally, she exclaimed, pushing past me into the apartment. I've been calling you for days. Ashley looked simultaneously polished and frayed, designer jeans, expensive highlights, but shadows beneath eyes too heavily lined and fingers that wouldn't stop fidgeting with her phone case. She dropped onto my sofa without invitation, her purse, which I recognized as a recent Gucci release, carelessly tossed aside. I've been busy, I replied, not bothering to mention I'd been screening her calls. How did you know I'd be home? Dad suggested I try catching you in person. She shrugged, eyes scanning my apartment with thinly veiled judgment. He said you're being difficult about helping me with my current situation. Current situation? The euphemism ignited something combustible inside me. You mean your $50,000 gambling debt to loan sharks? She flinched at my directness. God, Mel, you make it sound so sordid. Isn't it? Explain to me how there's anything not sordid about gambling away money you don't have to people who threaten violence when you can't pay. Ashley's eyes filled with practiced tears. You have no idea what I've been going through. My anxiety has been through the roof since Ryan and I broke up. The gambling started as just something to distract me, but then I won big once and thought I could solve all my problems. Ryan. The boyfriend I'd warned her was trouble when she'd called crying about catching him cheating. The boyfriend she'd gone back to 3 times. The boyfriend our parents had given a $5,000 business loan that disappeared with him when he finally left for good. So this is Ryan's fault? I asked. Partly, she admitted. And partly the casinos for making it so addictive. They prey on vulnerable people. I noticed she'd positioned herself as the victim in every scenario, responsibility deflected to others with practiced ease. The realization sent an electric current of clarity through me. Ashley, did you tell Mom and Dad the full amount you owe? Her gaze slid away from mine. What do you mean? Is it really $50,000, or is it more? A flush crept up her neck. Well, there might be some additional interest accruing daily, and a few smaller debts to friends I borrowed from first. How much? I demanded. Maybe 65 total? Possibly 70, she admitted, examining her manicure. But Dad said to just focus on the main debt for now. The casual way she added $20,000 to an already impossible sum stunned me into momentary silence. Have Mom and Dad bailed you out of gambling debts before? I asked, a new suspicion forming. Ashley twisted a strand of hair around her finger, a childhood tell that preceded dishonesty. Just a couple small ones. $10,000 last Christmas when I tried sports betting, and maybe $15,000 in March from an online poker situation. My stomach dropped. They gave you $25,000 already this year for gambling debts? Don't act so shocked, she snapped, defensive now. They helped you with college. I had scholarships that covered 70% of my tuition. I worked part-time and took out loans for the rest, which I just finished paying off after 7 years. Well, we can't all be perfect like you, she huffed. I took a steadying breath. What's your plan after this debt is paid? What changes? Her expression brightened instantly. I'm joining GA for real this time. Dad found me a therapist who specializes in addiction. And I'm taking a restorative vacation to clear my head. Jenna knows someone with a timeshare in Cabo I can use for super cheap. I just need to reset, you know. A vacation. To Mexico. After being bailed out of $70,000 in gambling debt. Each word felt like a stone dropping into still water, ripples of realization spreading outward. It's therapeutic, she defended. The therapist actually suggested it. Salt water heals everything. When were you planning this healing getaway? I asked, voice unnaturally calm. Next month, after everything settles down. Jenna can only get the timeshare in November. She brightened. You could come for a long weekend if you want. We could reconnect as sisters. The audacity left me speechless. In the silence, physical symptoms of suppressed rage manifested, a pounding heartbeat, tight chest, clenched jaw. I recognized the sensations from every past confrontation with my family that had ended with me capitulating for peace. A memory surfaced from when I was 16. I'd saved $600 for a laptop I needed for school assignments. Ashley, 14, had taken my bank card to buy clothes online without permission. When confronted, she'd cried to our parents, claiming I'd promised she could use it. They'd sided with her, calling me selfish for not sharing. I'd had to delay buying the laptop for another 4 months of extra babysitting shifts. Another flash, my college graduation, where my parents had arrived an hour late because Ashley's hair appointment ran long. They'd missed my summa cum laude recognition, arriving just in time to take photos they later displayed alongside Ashley's participation certificate from a weekend photography workshop. The pattern stretched back through decades, my accomplishments minimized, my sacrifices expected, my boundaries trampled while Ashley remained consequence-free. I need you to leave, I said quietly. But we haven't discussed the money, Ashley protested, genuinely confused by the shift. Dad said you'd have an answer by Friday. I have an answer now. I stood, gesturing to the door. The answer is no. Ashley's confusion transformed to indignation. You can't be serious. This isn't a joke, Melissa. These people are dangerous. They know where I live. Then perhaps you should stay with Mom and Dad until it's resolved. They said I can only move home after the debt is cleared, she admitted, confirming my suspicion that their asset-rich, cash-poor claim was a calculated fiction. How convenient for everyone but me, I observed. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm done being the family ATM and emotional support system while receiving nothing in return, I said, surprised by my steady voice despite the trembling in my hands. It means I'm no longer participating in this dysfunctional dynamic. You're being so dramatic, Ashley scoffed, retrieving her designer purse. Fine. I'll tell Dad you need more time to figure out the transfers. He'll be disappointed, but… No. The single syllable cut through her dismissal. Don't tell him I need more time. Tell him I said no. Permanently. She stared as if I'd started speaking a foreign language. You'd really let me face these consequences alone? After everything our family has done for you? The question was so profoundly disconnected from reality that laughter escaped me, harsh and unfamiliar. What exactly has our family done for me, Ashley? Please enlighten me. We, she stammered, genuinely struggling to produce examples. We've always been there for you emotionally. Goodbye, Ashley, I said, opening my door. I suggest you start selling your designer collection. That purse alone would make a decent down payment on your debt. She stormed out, pausing in the hallway. You'll regret this when you calm down. Family is forever, Melissa. As I closed the door, I whispered to the empty apartment, not if I can help it. That evening, I called my therapist for an emergency session. After listening to the entire saga, she leaned forward in her chair. Melissa, what you're describing isn't family obligation. It's financial and emotional abuse, she said gently. Your instinct to protect yourself is healthy, not selfish. I'm thinking of doing something drastic, I admitted. Something that would remove me from this situation completely. How drastic? I'm considering disappearing. Starting over somewhere they can't find me. Rather than the shock or discouragement I expected, she nodded thoughtfully. In some situations, creating significant distance is the healthiest option. What would this look like for you? For the next hour, we explored the practical and emotional implications of my nascent plan. By session's end, what had begun as a desperate impulse had crystallized into a methodical escape route. That night, I researched how people legally disconnect from toxic situations. I learned about digital footprints, financial trails, and practical strategies for starting fresh. With each article and forum, the impossible began to seem possible. By sunrise, my decision was made. I would vanish from my family's life like morning mist under a hot sun. Not forever, I wasn't planning anything illegal, but long enough to break the cycle that had defined my existence for 28 years. The week following Ashley's visit became a masterclass in methodical planning. Each day after work, I dedicated hours to dismantling and reconstructing my life piece by piece, weaving freedom from the threads of my existing identity. My first priority was financial insulation. I knew my parents, particularly my father with his business connections, might attempt to trace me through banking activities. I began by opening a new checking account at an online bank with no physical branches, using my work address for correspondence. I researched secure transfer methods and gradually moved my savings in amounts small enough to avoid triggering automatic notifications. Cash would be essential for the initial transition. I calculated 3 months of basic living expenses and began withdrawing the maximum daily ATM limit, storing the cash in a fireproof document bag. Each transaction felt both terrifying and liberating, physical currency representing mobility and anonymity. My apartment lease fortuitously ended in 30 days. I informed my landlord I wouldn't be renewing, citing a job opportunity in Seattle, a deliberate false trail. He seemed genuinely disappointed to lose a reliable tenant, but wished me well in my new position. The process of selling and donating possessions became unexpectedly therapeutic. Each item represented a decision: what was essential enough to warrant transportation, what could be replaced, what held sentimental value that outweighed practical concerns. My carefully curated furniture, once symbols of independence, transformed into bulky anchors I gladly listed on marketplace apps. I kept only what fit into my Toyota Corolla: clothes for multiple seasons, important documents in a lockbox, my grandmother's quilt, a few cherished books, my laptop, and professional credentials. Everything else, kitchenware, furniture, decorative items, and electronics, converted to cash that padded my escape fund. Digital disentanglement proved more complex. I created new email addresses with no connection to my existing accounts. I downloaded important documents and photographs to an external hard drive, then systematically deactivated social media profiles after scrubbing location data from past posts. My smartphone represented perhaps the greatest tracking vulnerability. I researched cell phone plans that required no long-term contract and purchased a basic prepaid phone with cash from a convenience store miles from my neighborhood. I would activate it only after leaving Chicago, keeping my existing number operational until departure to avoid raising suspicions. Professional considerations required delicate handling. I had built a solid reputation at my accounting firm over years of dedicated work. Abandoning this professional foundation entirely seemed foolish, yet maintaining connections risked exposure. After careful consideration, I requested a meeting with my direct supervisor, Thomas. A family health situation has emerged, I explained, maintaining eye contact despite the half-truth. I need to relocate quickly to assist with long-term care. Thomas expressed genuine concern. Is there anything the firm can do? A leave of absence, perhaps? I appreciate that, but the situation requires a permanent move, I replied. I've valued my time here immensely and would be grateful for references as I establish myself elsewhere. His disappointment was evident, but so was his understanding. You've been an exceptional team member, Melissa. I'd be happy to serve as a reference. Just provide contact information when you're settled. This conversation secured professional bridges without revealing my true destination. Thomas agreed to keep my departure relatively quiet until my final day, allowing me to collect references from key colleagues without broadcasting my intentions. Legal considerations occupied several evenings of research. I wasn't attempting to change my identity or escape legal obligations, merely to establish boundaries my family couldn't easily breach. I verified that no laws prevented an adult from relocating without disclosure, provided no court orders, shared custody arrangements, or active bankruptcies existed. I had none of these complications. I maintained my scheduled therapy appointments, finding them invaluable for processing the complex emotions arising from my decision. My therapist helped me distinguish between healthy separation and reactive isolation, ensuring my plan came from self-preservation rather than pure retaliation. Remember, she advised during our final session, disappearing physically is the first step. The real work will be disappearing emotionally from unhealthy dynamics so you don't recreate them elsewhere. The most difficult preparation involved Rachel, my closest friend since college and the only person I trusted with limited knowledge of my plan. We met at a park far from our usual haunts, walking along the lakefront where conversation couldn't be easily overheard. "I can't know everything," she said after I outlined my general intentions. "If they contact me, and they will, I need plausible deniability." "I understand," I assured her. "All I need is someone who knows I'm safe, even if you don't know exactly where. Would you be willing to be that person?" "I'll establish secure communication once I'm settled." Rachel squeezed my hand. "Of course. Just promise me this is a boundary, not a permanent disappearance." "I couldn't bear losing you entirely." "It's not forever," I promised. "Just long enough to break the pattern." I left one final misleading clue in my apartment, a printed email confirmation for an Airbnb in Seattle, dated for the day after my planned departure. In reality, I had secured temporary accommodations in Denver through a housing service that catered to traveling professionals, requiring no long-term commitment or extensive background verification. My last day at work arrived with surprising normalcy. I completed transition memos for ongoing projects, collected personal items throughout the day to avoid a conspicuous departure, and accepted a modest goodbye gathering with immediate team members. That evening, I performed a final sweep of my nearly empty apartment. The space looked staged in its bareness. A few furniture pieces remained for the landlord to donate, surfaces wiped clean of fingerprints and memories alike. I wrote a final entry in my journal, the only place I documented my true thoughts throughout the process. Tomorrow I drive away from 28 years of being who everyone expected. I'm terrified. I'm exhilarated. I'm mourning and celebrating simultaneously. This isn't running away. It's running towards something I've never had, freedom to exist without constant emotional taxation. Maybe someday I'll return with boundaries so strong they can't be breached. Until then, I release myself from obligations built on manipulation rather than love. I slept on an air mattress that final night, surrounded by the strategically packed contents of my car. As dawn broke over Chicago's skyline, I loaded the last items, dropped my keys in the landlord's secure mailbox, and pulled away from the curb. No dramatic last looks, no hesitation. Just the quiet certainty that the road ahead, though uncertain, offered something my rearview mirror never had, possibility untainted by expectation. The interstate stretched before me like a ribbon of possibility as Chicago's skyline diminished in my rearview mirror. I'd deliberately chosen a route avoiding major highways near my parents' suburb, reducing the already minimal chance of accidental discovery. The October morning glowed with autumn colors that seemed to affirm my decision with every mile marker. My Toyota Corolla, the same reliable vehicle I'd purchased with my own savings at 16, carried everything I considered essential for my new beginning. I allowed myself no music for the first 100 miles, using the silence to process the magnitude of what I'd set in motion. By the Iowa border, I felt ready for melodies again, creating a soundtrack for my liberation. I maintained a disciplined travel schedule with minimal stops, gas stations where I paid cash, drive-through meals consumed behind the wheel, and a single overnight stay at a roadside motel where I registered under my real name, but paid with cash. I wasn't attempting to create a false identity, simply reducing my digital footprint. The Rocky Mountains appeared on the horizon during my second day of driving, massive, indifferent to human dramas, yet somehow welcoming in their solidity. Denver emerged from the foothills as evening approached, its grid of lights appearing like a constellation created specifically to guide me. My temporary housing was located in a modern building in the Rhino district, a studio apartment with basic furnishings and utilities included, leased through a housing service that specialized in short-term accommodations for traveling professionals. The monthly rate exceeded what I'd paid in Chicago, but the flexibility justified the expense. I could extend month to month or leave with 2 weeks' notice once I secured permanent housing. That first night in Denver brought an emotional tsunami I hadn't permitted myself during planning. I sat on the unfamiliar bed, surrounded by packed bags in an echoing space, and finally allowed myself to cry. Not delicate tears of regret, but body-racking sobs of release, grief for the family I wished I'd had, relief from the constant anxiety of expectation, fear of the unknown path ahead, and fierce pride in my courage to choose it anyway. The initial week passed in a blur of practical necessities. I activated my new phone with its Denver area code, established utilities in my name, located essential services in my neighborhood, and began exploring the city that would be my sanctuary. I withdrew minimal cash from ATMs distant from my apartment, knowing each transaction created digital breadcrumbs I preferred to minimize. My emotional state fluctuated wildly during those early days. Mornings often brought exhilarating freedom, the simple pleasure of waking without dread of family demands. Afternoons sometimes carried creeping doubts about the extremity of my response. Evenings occasionally collapsed into crushing loneliness, the silence of my apartment emphasizing the completeness of my severance. I established secure communication with Rachel using encrypted messaging, sending her confirmation of my safe arrival without specific location details. "I'm somewhere with mountains and possibility," I wrote. "I'm terrified and hopeful in equal measure." Her response brought the first genuine smile since my arrival. "The family circus is in full meltdown mode. Your fathers alternate between rage and disbelief. Your mother calls hourly crying. Ashley's actually showing genuine worry beneath the self-pity. You've accomplished the impossible, united them in something besides enabling her." Securing employment became my next priority. I approached the job search strategically, focusing on smaller firms and businesses where my Chicago experience would be valuable but connections to my former employer unlikely. I crafted a resume emphasizing my skills while presenting my departure from Chicago as a planned relocation for personal reasons. After several interviews, I accepted a position as a bookkeeper for a family-owned property management company, a step down from my previous role, but offering a cash-heavy business environment where my skills could demonstrate value quickly. The owners, a brother-sister team who had inherited the business from their parents, appreciated my attention to detail and willingness to modernize their somewhat outdated systems. With income secured, I found a modestly priced apartment in the Cheeseman Park neighborhood, a one-bedroom unit in a converted Victorian with architectural character my Chicago apartment had lacked. The landlord, an elderly woman who lived on the first floor, seemed to value quiet tenants over maximum profit, offering me a reasonable rate after a brief interview that focused more on my willingness to water the building's shared garden than my credit history. Establishing new daily routines helped anchor me during waves of doubt. Mornings began with coffee on my small balcony overlooking mature trees that had witnessed decades of human dramas without judgment. Evenings often included walks through the sprawling park nearby, where I practiced being comfortably alone among strangers, a skill that proved crucial to rebuilding social connections at a pace that felt safe. The holidays arrived with unexpected emotional intensity. Thanksgiving passed with a microwaved meal and a video chat with Rachel, who reported my family's increasingly desperate attempts to locate me. Christmas brought a care package from her, containing Chicago-specific treats and a handwritten note. They filed a missing person report. Police interviewed me. "I said you'd mention Seattle job opportunities before leaving. You remain brilliantly missing. P.S. They're monitoring your student loan payments and credit reports." This information necessitated additional precautions. I maintained minimum payments on existing accounts through automatic withdrawals from my original bank account, which I kept active with minimal funds. I established utilities and rent payments through my new accounts, creating a careful separation between past and present financial identities. Making new acquaintances required conscious effort after years of work-centered existence in Chicago. I joined a community garden group, volunteered monthly at a local food bank, and eventually enrolled in a photography class at a community center, activities that allowed controlled social interaction without the vulnerability of immediate friendship. 6 months into my Denver life, I experienced my first genuine connection with a potential friend. Natalie, a graphic designer who shared my community garden plot rotation, invited me to a casual dinner party with her small circle of friends. The evening passed without the need to fabricate or conceal my past. I simply presented an edited version focusing on professional experience rather than family dynamics. "You seem like someone who's reinventing herself," Natalie observed as we washed dishes after her guests departed. I did something similar after my divorce. There's a particular look people get when they're building from scratch, part terrified, part liberated. Her perception startled me, but her matter-of-fact acceptance, without probing questions, offered a template for how healthy relationships respected boundaries. We developed a friendship based on present experiences rather than past revelations, a novel concept after years of family relationships defined entirely by shared history and obligation. Rachel continued providing updates about my family's escalating responses. The missing person report prompted a cursory police investigation that concluded I had left voluntarily, removing any law enforcement concerns. My parents, unsatisfied, hired a private investigator who tracked my final financial transactions to the Iowa border before the trail grew cold. "They've put up one of those awful, missing pages on Facebook," Rachel reported. "Your mother posts daily updates written directly to you, begging you to come home." Ashley did a tearful interview with a local news station. "It's quite the performance." The news coverage represented an unexpected complication. I maintained vigilant privacy practices, limiting social media to read-only accounts under variations of my middle name, wearing sunglasses in the few group photos taken during community events, and declining to appear in the Community Gardens newsletter feature on new members. Nearly a year into my new life, I experienced a heart-stopping moment while grocery shopping. A man in a polo shirt photographed shoppers near the produce section, apparently for the store's social media. I abandoned my half-filled cart and left immediately, taking a circuitous route home to ensure I wasn't followed. The incident triggered a panic attack, my first since leaving Chicago, and a temporary regression into isolation. My employer noticed my withdrawal and approached with unexpected compassion. "Whatever you're working through, Melissa, we respect your privacy," the sister owner assured me. "Your work remains excellent. Take whatever space you need." This simple acknowledgement of boundaries without invasion helped restore my equilibrium. I gradually resumed community activities, though with heightened awareness of potential exposure. The most surprising development came 15 months after my departure, when Rachel reported a significant shift in family dynamics. "Ashley moved out of your parents' house. Apparently, she's actually attending GA meetings regularly and working 2 jobs to pay down her debts. Your disappearance seems to have forced some uncomfortable reckonings." This information produced complex emotions. Satisfaction that consequences had finally manifested, guilt over the pain my absence caused, and tentative hope that genuine change might be possible. Still, I maintained my distance, recognizing that meaningful transformation required more than temporary behavioral adjustments. As Denver's season cycled through my second year, my existence transformed from a reactive escape to a deliberately chosen life. I received a promotion to financial controller at work, expanded my social circle cautiously, and began dating again, meeting Michael, a structural engineer who approached relationships with the same thoughtful intentionality I'd developed through my journey. "You're careful about what you share," he observed during our third date. "I respect that. We all have histories we reveal in our own time." His patience allowed trust to develop organically. When I eventually shared a carefully edited version of my family estrangement, his response solidified my growing feelings. Family should earn their place in your life, just like everyone else. Biology alone isn't an unlimited access pass. By my third anniversary of leaving Chicago, Denver no longer felt like a hiding place, but a genuine home. I had built a chosen family of friends who respected boundaries, developed a fulfilling career path, and created a relationship based on mutual support rather than obligation or manipulation. The hypervigilance of those early months had gradually subsided, replaced by a quiet confidence in my ability to navigate challenges without sacrificing self-respect. Rachel's updates about my family became less frequent as their search efforts diminished. "They still mention you at holidays," she reported. "But the desperate searching has stopped. I think they've accepted that you left by choice, even if they don't understand why." This development brought unexpected peace. I hadn't disappeared to punish them eternally, but to break patterns too entrenched to address from within. With 3 years of perspective and healing, I began considering what controlled reconnection might look like, not a return to old dynamics, but perhaps the possibility of a new relationship defined by respect rather than exploitation. The full extent of my family's reaction to my disappearance unfolded through Rachel's carefully encrypted updates, creating a surreal experience of watching my absence ripple through their lives from a safe distance. Initially, their response followed predictable patterns. My father responded with indignation, certain I was simply being dramatic and would return once I came to my senses. He left increasingly aggressive voicemails on my disconnected Chicago number, his tone evolving from commanding to threatened as days passed without response. My mother took a different approach, leaving tearful messages alternating between guilt-inducing worry and offers of compromise. "We can discuss different payment arrangements for your sister's situation. Please just let us know you're safe." Her emotional manipulation tactics, so effective throughout my childhood, echoed hollowly into a void I no longer occupied. Ashley's first messages reflected pure self-absorption. "How could you do this to me? I'm going to lose everything because you're being selfish." The lack of concern for my welfare spoke volumes about the one-sided nature of our relationship. After a week of silence, their concern apparently became genuine. Rachel reported daily calls to her phone, which she answered with carefully crafted half-truths. Melissa mentioned feeling overwhelmed and needing space. "I'm sure she'll contact you when she's ready." She deflected their increasingly pointed questions with the plausible deniability we'd established. "Your father showed up at my apartment," she texted during my second week in Denver. "He demanded to know if I was harboring you." His exact word. "I showed him I live alone and suggested he give you space." He looked genuinely shaken. By the third week, my family transitioned from private concern to public action. They filed a missing person report with the Chicago Police Department, claiming I had disappeared under suspicious circumstances. The detective assigned to the case contacted my former employer, who confirmed my voluntary resignation with 2 weeks' notice. The bank verified regular withdrawals and account activity leading up to my departure. My landlord provided information about my lease non-renewal and orderly move-out. These factual details contradicted my family's narrative of sudden, concerning disappearance. The detective contacted Rachel, who maintained our agreed-upon story. Melissa mentioned job opportunities in Seattle. She seemed excited about a fresh start. The police investigation concluded I was an adult who had chosen to leave without maintaining family contact, a personal decision outside law enforcement jurisdiction. The case was closed with a notation that I had left voluntarily, a fact my parents refused to accept. "They've hired a private investigator," Rachel reported a month into my new life. "Some former police detective who specializes in finding people. Your father mentioned it when he called demanding I tell him where you were hiding me." This development necessitated additional caution in my already careful routine. I varied my commute routes, limited outdoor activities temporarily, and researched what information private investigators could legally access. Learning they could monitor credit bureau activities prompted me to freeze my credit reports, preventing new inquiries that might reveal my location. The investigator managed to trace my car to the Iowa border through gas station camera footage, but the trail went cold as I had switched to cash-only purchases beyond that point. Rachel forwarded a photo he had shown her, a grainy image of me pumping gas at a station just outside Chicago. The sight of myself being surveilled sent a chill through me despite the distance and time that had passed. 6 weeks after my disappearance, my family escalated to media involvement. A local Chicago news station ran a human interest story about a successful young accountant who vanished without explanation, featuring tearful interviews with my mother and sister. "Your sister's performance is Oscar-worthy," Rachel noted after sending a link to the segment. "She actually brought photos of you two as children and talked about how close you were growing up." Pure fiction. My mother described herself as absolutely devastated and just wanting to know her daughter is safe. My father, presenting himself as the concerned family patriarch, offered a $5,000 reward for information, leading to confirmation of my whereabouts. The broadcast included my professional headshot from my former employer's website and details about my Toyota Corolla. The public exposure created new vulnerabilities. I purchased a car cover to shield my vehicle in my apartment building's parking lot and temporarily dyed my hair from brown to auburn. I continued working but declined to appear in the company newsletter's employee spotlight despite my promotion. Rachel forwarded screenshots of a Facebook page my mother had created titled "Finding Melissa Hudson," which rapidly accumulated sympathetic comments and shares. Posts featured childhood photos, manufactured happy family memories, and heart-wrenching pleas directed to me. "Please come home, sweetheart. Whatever the problem, we can solve it together as a family. Nothing is worth this pain and separation." The dissonance between these public declarations and the manipulative ultimatum that had triggered my departure was stark. In private messages to Rachel, my mother painted a different picture. "She's always been difficult and oversensitive. This disappearing act is just another way to punish us for asking for help with Ashley." 3 months after I left, the private investigator expanded his search to Seattle based on the misleading information I had strategically planted. Rachel reported he had interviewed several accounting firms there and monitored apartment listings in the area. Meanwhile, I had established a comfortable routine in Denver, thousands of miles from his search radius. "Your family's credit card statements show hotel charges in Seattle," Rachel texted. "Your parents spent a week there looking for you. Ashley stayed home because she couldn't handle the emotional strain, according to your mom." The intensity of the search fluctuated over the following months. Media interest waned after the initial story generated no leads. The Facebook page updates became less frequent. The private investigator continued periodic activity, but focused increasingly on digital monitoring rather than physical searching. "Your father's convinced you've changed your name," Rachel reported 6 months into my absence. "He's having the investigator monitor name change petitions in courts nationwide." I didn't mention that's public record. He could search himself. Around the 8-month mark, a close call occurred that validated my continued vigilance. Rachel called rather than texted, her voice tense. The investigator showed up with photos from a job networking site. "Someone from your old firm recommended a junior accountant for a position in Denver, and you were in the background of a group photo from a conference. It's blurry, but he's expanded his search to Colorado." The photo had been taken before I left Chicago, but posted months later when the junior accountant was job hunting. Though the coincidental Denver connection was unrelated to my actual location, it brought the search uncomfortably close. I took additional precautions, changing my everyday hairstyle, adding non-prescription glasses to my appearance, and temporarily reducing my already limited social media consumption to eliminate any risk of algorithmic connections. The private investigator's Denver inquiries fortunately centered on downtown accounting firms rather than the residential property management company where I worked. After several weeks of heightened caution, Rachel confirmed he had returned to Chicago, apparently convinced the lead was a coincidence. "The investigators billing your father a small fortune with nothing to show for it," she reported. "I overheard your mother telling Ashley they might have to take a break from the search for financial reasons." Around the 1-year mark, a significant shift occurred in my family's approach. The desperate searching gave way to a narrative that better protected their self-image. Rather than acknowledging the dysfunction that had driven me away, they began describing me to extended family and friends as suffering from mental health issues that had caused an irrational break from the family. "Your Aunt Julia called me," Rachel reported. "Your mother told her you'd been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder before disappearing. Pure fabrication, obviously, but it gives them a way to explain your absence without questioning their behavior. This reimagining of my history to include fictional mental illness was particularly painful, representing a fundamental refusal to recognize the rational, self-protective nature of my decision. However, it also indicated their acceptance that I wasn't coming back on their terms, a necessary, if uncomfortable step toward potential future engagement on mine. As the second year of my absence progressed, the intensity of the search diminished significantly. The private investigator was retained on a monthly consultation basis rather than active searching. The Facebook page became dormant except for anniversary posts. Family friends stopped asking about me, accepting the mental health explanation or simply respecting privacy around a difficult situation. The most unexpected development came 20 months after my departure. Rachel reported Ashley had moved out of our parents' home and into a modest apartment of her own. She had apparently maintained regular attendance at Gamblers Anonymous for over a year and secured stable employment at an insurance office and weekend retail position. "She's actually making payments to your parents for the gambling debts they covered," Rachel noted with evident surprise. "Your mother complained to me that Ashley barely has time to visit anymore because of her excessive working hours." The irony is apparently lost on her. This news produced complicated emotions. While I felt a measure of satisfaction that my absence had apparently catalyzed actual consequences and growth for Ashley, I also felt genuine sadness that such extreme measures had been necessary to break the enabling pattern. I wondered if I might have achieved the same outcome through less drastic boundary setting, then reminded myself of the decades of evidence suggesting otherwise. Near the 3-year mark of my departure, Rachel reported my parents had sold their sprawling suburban home and downsized to a townhouse, citing empty nest adjustments, rather than the financial strain of the private investigator, Ashley's partially repaid debts, and their own lifestyle choices. "Your father actually retired," she noted with surprise. "He transferred day-to-day operations of the construction company to his business partner's son. Your mother's selling real estate full-time now instead of just occasionally. They seem different. Still problematic in many ways, but different." These updates confirmed what I had hoped but hadn't dared expect. My absence had forced actual changes rather than merely temporary adjustments to lure me back. The family system had been genuinely disrupted, creating space for new patterns to potentially emerge. Whether those patterns would prove healthier remained to be seen, but the calcified dynamics that had seemed immutable had finally begun to shift. As I approached the 3-year anniversary of my departure, a final update from Rachel gave me pause. "Your mother asked me directly if I knew where you were, not to tell them, but to confirm you were safe." For the first time, she didn't try to guilt me or demand information. She just said, "If you have any way of telling Melissa we're ready to listen when she's ready to talk, please pass that along." It seemed sincere. This message, stripped of manipulation tactics and ultimatums, represented the first acknowledgement that reconnection would happen on my terms if it happened at all. After 3 years of healing and building a life based on mutual respect rather than obligation, I began to consider what controlled, boundaried contact might look like. I wasn't ready to return to Chicago or reveal my location, but I was approaching a place where complete severance no longer seemed necessary for self-preservation. The question became not whether I would maintain my disappearance indefinitely, but whether the painful space I had created had catalyzed enough change to make limited reconnection possible without risking the hard-won health I'd established. The 3 years following my disappearance from Chicago transformed me in ways I couldn't have anticipated when I first drove across the Iowa border with my life packed into a Toyota Corolla. What began as an escape gradually evolved into an opportunity for profound personal reconstruction, the rare chance to define myself outside the narrow identity my family had assigned me. My career trajectory reflected this evolution. From the initial bookkeeper position at the property management company, a deliberate step down from my previous role, I steadily rebuilt my professional identity through demonstrated competence rather than credentials alone. My detailed analysis of their outdated systems saved significant tax liability in the first year, earning a promotion to staff accountant. By my second anniversary in Denver, I had advanced to financial controller, overseeing a small team and modernizing operations that had relied on increasingly obsolete methods. "You think differently than our previous financial people," my employer commented during my performance review. "You don't just manage numbers, you see the story they tell about our business." This observation highlighted how my professional approach had evolved. In Chicago, I had pursued advancement largely to prove my worth to my family, to colleagues, to myself. In Denver, freed from external expectations, I discovered genuine passion for translating financial data into strategic insights. My work became less about validation and more about contribution. The financial stability this career progression provided allowed me to address the psychological impact of my family dynamics through regular therapy. I found a therapist specializing in family trauma who helped me understand how deeply the patterns of emotional manipulation had affected my self-perception and relationships. "What you're describing is parentification," she explained during an early session. "You were assigned adult responsibilities and emotional burdens from childhood, while your sister remained in an infantilized state. This creates profound disruption in how you form attachments and establish boundaries." These insights provided context for behaviors I had previously attributed to personal failings, my tendency toward hyperresponsibility, difficulty expressing needs, and pattern of attracting relationships with people who required caretaking rather than offering partnership. Understanding these patterns as adaptive responses to dysfunction rather than character flaws allowed me to begin consciously reshaping them. The most visible manifestation of this growth appeared in my expanding social connections. Initially, I approached relationship building with extreme caution, fearing exposure of my circumstances and the vulnerability inherent in genuine connection. My first friendships in Denver developed through structured activities with clear boundaries, community garden shifts, volunteer positions at the local food bank, a photography class at the community center. Natalie, my first significant friendship, helped me recognize how isolation could become its own form of prison. "Being careful about who you let in makes sense," she observed over coffee after we'd known each other several months. "But a life without meaningful connection isn't really living, it's just surviving." Her words resonated with painful accuracy. I had physically escaped my family's manipulation but remained emotionally constrained by fear and protective hypervigilance. With careful discernment, I began expanding my social circle, joining a hiking group that explored Colorado's mountain trails, accepting dinner invitations, and eventually hosting small gatherings in my apartment. These connections introduced me to people whose family relationships existed on a spectrum from healthy interdependence to complete estrangement. Margaret, a retired librarian from my hiking group, had maintained minimal contact with her alcoholic parents throughout adulthood. Limited engagement on my terms preserved my sanity without requiring total severance, she shared during a mountain summit rest break. "I visit twice yearly with clear time boundaries and leave when the drinking starts." Jason, a software developer I met through Natalie, hadn't spoken to his father in 12 years following financial exploitation similar to my experience. "Some relationships can't be salvaged," he said matter-of-factly during a dinner party discussion about family holiday stress. "Recognizing that isn't failure, it's self-preservation." These varied perspectives helped me understand estrangement not as a binary choice, but as a spectrum of boundaries tailored to specific situations. My complete break had been necessary to interrupt entrenched patterns, but the maintenance of that absolute separation might not be essential indefinitely if genuine change occurred on both sides. Physical well-being became another focus of my reconstructed life. The constant stress of navigating family expectations had manifested in chronic tension headaches, disrupted sleep patterns, and stress-induced digestive issues throughout my 20s. These symptoms had become so normalized I barely recognized them as abnormal until they began to subside in my new environment. I developed routines that prioritized physical health, morning runs through Cheeseman Park, meal preparation emphasizing nutrition rather than convenience, and adequate sleep uninterrupted by late-night family crisis calls. The transformation was remarkable: improved energy, clearer thinking, and a general sense of vitality I hadn't experienced since childhood. Dating proved the most challenging arena for implementing my evolving understanding of healthy relationships. My first attempts in Denver replicated familiar patterns. Attraction to partners who needed financial or emotional rescue, discomfort with reciprocal support, difficulty articulating boundaries. Through therapeutic work and painful trial and error, I gradually developed healthier patterns of romantic connection. Michael entered my life during this period of intentional growth. We met through a mutual friend at a neighborhood festival celebrating local artists. Unlike previous romantic interests, he exhibited clear boundaries, emotional self-sufficiency, and genuine curiosity without invasive questioning. "I notice you're careful about sharing personal history," he observed during our third date at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the mountains. "I respect that. We're writing our story now, not obligated to be defined by chapters already written." His respect for my privacy without taking it personally allowed trust to develop organically. When I eventually shared a carefully edited version of my family estrangement, his response solidified my growing feelings. Family should earn their place in your life, just like everyone else. Biology alone isn't an unlimited access pass. This simple validation, so contrary to my family's blood is everything manipulation, created space for a relationship built on mutual respect rather than obligation or rescue fantasies. As our connection deepened over months of hiking adventures, quiet evenings cooking together, and thoughtful conversations, I experienced for the first time a partnership that enhanced rather than depleted my sense of self. The concept of chosen family took concrete form through these developing relationships. Thanksgiving dinner at Natalie's apartment with an assortment of friends, some estranged from biological family, others geographic transplants, a few simply preferring chosen connections to obligatory gatherings, demonstrated the possibility of meaningful tradition without toxic dynamics. "To family we choose," Natalie toasted, raising her glass around a table laden with potluck contributions. "The people who see us clearly and love us anyway." The contrast between this warm gathering and memories of tense family holidays where my achievements were minimized and Ashley's latest dramas centered couldn't have been sharper. I realized with startling clarity that I felt more authentic belonging among these relative strangers than I had ever experienced with blood relations. Spiritually and philosophically, this period prompted profound reconsideration of concepts I had previously accepted without examination. The notion of family obligation as sacred and unquestionable, central to my parents' manipulation tactics, gave way to more nuanced understanding of reciprocity and genuine connection. The religious teachings about honoring parents that had been weaponized to ensure compliance expanded to include recognition that true honor sometimes requires difficult boundaries. I explored these evolving beliefs through reading across philosophical traditions, discussions with diverse friends, and meditation practices that helped distinguish between guilt arising from violated indoctrination versus genuine moral discomfort. The resulting personal ethical framework privileged compassion for others and myself over rigid obligation and recognized interdependence built on mutual respect as healthier than dependency maintained through manipulation. Throughout this period of growth, occasional updates from Rachel provided perspective on my family's parallel journey. Ashley's unexpected development of responsibility, maintaining employment, attending recovery meetings, repaying debts, suggested my absence had indeed disrupted enabling patterns that had preserved her perpetual adolescence. My parents' lifestyle adjustments, downsizing their home, increasing work commitments, retiring from the construction company, indicated financial recalibration after years of bailing out my sister. While I felt satisfaction that my dramatic boundary setting had catalyzed actual changes, I harbored no illusions about complete transformation. 3 years could begin meaningful change, but couldn't entirely rewire lifelong patterns. Any potential reconnection would require careful structuring to prevent regression to established dynamics. On the 3rd anniversary of my departure, I reflected on the distance traveled, not just the physical miles between Chicago and Denver, but the psychological journey from defined by others to self-determining. I had built financial security, meaningful connections, professional fulfillment, and personal health practices that constituted a genuinely authentic life, rather than a reactive existence. This foundation of self-knowledge and healthy boundaries positioned me to consider what had previously seemed impossible: controlled reconnection with my family. Not a return to Chicago or to previous patterns, but limited engagement that acknowledged both our shared history and my non-negotiable need for respect. The question was no longer whether complete separation was necessary for survival, but whether sufficient change had occurred on both sides to attempt a new, fundamentally different relationship. Rachel's report of my mother's message, "We're ready to listen when she's ready to talk," suggested at least openness to altered terms of engagement. With Michael's supportive perspective, my therapist's guidance, and the confidence of 3 years' successful independence, I began considering how to establish contact while maintaining the hard-won health I'd built. The prospect generated both anxiety and tentative hope, emotions I now recognized as natural responses to significant risk rather than weakness requiring suppression. Whatever came next, I faced it not as the accommodating daughter desperate for approval, but as a whole person with clear boundaries and the demonstrated capacity to enforce them, even through the most radical means necessary. 3 years and 4 months after driving away from Chicago, I sat at my desk in Denver staring at a blank email screen. After weeks of careful consideration, consultations with my therapist, and honest conversations with Michael, I had decided to initiate limited contact with my family. The cursor blinked steadily as I gathered courage to type words that would bridge the chasm I had deliberately created. Keep it simple and clear, my therapist had advised. State your terms before engagement begins, not after patterns have already reestablished. With resolute calm, I created a new email account specifically for family communication and composed my message. To my family, asterisk. I am safe, healthy, and well. After 3 years of reflection and growth, I'm open to limited communication under specific conditions, asterisk. 1. My location and personal details remain private for now, asterisk. 2. No financial discussions or requests, asterisk. 3. Communication initially limited to email, asterisk. 4. Respect for my decisions and boundaries is non-negotiable, asterisk. If these terms are acceptable, we can begin rebuilding a relationship based on mutual respect rather than obligation. If not, I will continue my separate path with peace, asterisk. Melissa, asterisk. I sent the message to my parents' email address, which Rachel had confirmed remained active. Then I closed my laptop and took a long hike in the foothills with Michael, deliberately leaving my phone behind. Whatever their immediate reaction, I wouldn't let it disturb the centered calm I'd worked so hard to establish. When I returned home and checked the dedicated email account, 3 messages awaited. The first, timestamped 20 minutes after my initial contact, contained a single line from my father. "Where are you? This disappearing act has gone on long enough." The second, sent an hour later, came from my mother. "Melissa, we've been sick with worry for 3 years. How could you be so cruel? We deserve more than cold conditions after what you've put us through." The third arrived 5 hours after my message, again from my father, with a markedly different tone. "Melissa, asterisk. Your mother and I apologize for our initial responses. The shock of hearing from you after so long overwhelmed our better judgment. We accept your terms for communication and are grateful for the opportunity to reconnect, however limited. We have many questions, but will respect your boundaries, asterisk. Dad, asterisk." The stark contrast between their initial reactions and the measured final response spoke volumes. In the past, I would have responded immediately to their emotional manipulation, apologizing for causing pain despite my legitimate reasons for distance. Now, I recognized the pattern and gave myself permission to respond on my own timeline. After 2 days of reflection, I replied, "Thank you for accepting these parameters. I suggest weekly email exchanges to start, focusing on present circumstances rather than rehashing the past. I'd like to know how you're both doing in your daily lives, asterisk. Melissa, asterisk." This established a rhythm of weekly correspondence that gradually revealed significant changes in my family's circumstances. My parents had indeed sold their suburban home for a more modest townhouse. My father had stepped back from daily operations of his construction business, though he maintained ownership interest. My mother had increased her real estate work from occasional to full-time. Most surprisingly, Ashley had maintained her independence, sharing an apartment with a roommate and holding steady employment. She had reached the one-year CHIP milestone in Gamblers Anonymous and was slowly repaying my parents for the debts they had covered. "She asks about you often," my mother wrote in our 6th week of correspondence. "Would you consider allowing her to join our communications?" After consultation with my therapist, I agreed to include Ashley in limited exchanges. Her first message was uncharacteristically humble. "Melissa, asterisk. I don't know where to start except to say I'm sorry. Not just for the money situation that was the final straw, but for years of taking you for granted and never appreciating how much you sacrificed. I understand if you can't forgive me, but I hope someday you'll give me the chance to show you I'm changing, asterisk. Ashley asterisk." While her words seemed sincere, I remained cautiously optimistic rather than immediately trusting. Sustained behavior change would prove more meaningful than momentary remorse. Still, the acknowledgement represented progress I wouldn't have thought possible 3 years earlier. After 3 months of email exchanges, I agreed to a video call with clear parameters, 30 minutes maximum, no questions about my location, focus on current circumstances rather than past grievances. I scheduled the call during my lunch break at work, deliberately limiting potential emotional aftermath. Seeing my family's faces on screen after 3 years of absence produced a complex emotional surge: recognition, wariness, residual affection, protective vigilance. My mother had aged visibly, new lines etched around her eyes and mouth. My father's hair had grayed completely. Ashley looked somehow both older and healthier, the perpetual girlishness replaced by more mature features. "You look wonderful," my mother said immediately, tears forming. "So, grown up." My father, less comfortable with emotional display, simply nodded. "You seem well." The conversation progressed with uncharacteristic caution from my parents. When my mother began a question about where I was living, my father gently redirected, "We agreed not to ask those questions, Margaret." Melissa's terms were clear. This intervention, my father enforcing a boundary against my mother's questioning, represented such a departure from established family dynamics that I momentarily lost my rehearsed composure. Perhaps more significant change had occurred than I had allowed myself to believe possible. Ashley spoke little during this first call, mostly observing the interaction with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. When she did contribute, her comments remained present-focused rather than manipulative or self-centered, describing her job responsibilities and recovery program without dramatization. As our agreed 30 minutes concluded, I thanked them for respecting the parameters and suggested we continue with weekly emails and monthly video calls if this interaction felt productive to everyone. They agreed readily, seemingly grateful for any contact on whatever terms I offered. Over the following months, these structured interactions gradually revealed the extent to which my disappearance had disrupted entrenched family patterns. My parents had been forced to examine their enabling behaviors when Ashley's gambling addiction continued without my financial safety net. Ashley had faced actual consequences for her choices, catalyzing genuine engagement with recovery. 6 months after our initial reconnection, I agreed to an in-person meeting at a neutral location, a restaurant in Minneapolis, selected for its significant distance from both Chicago and Denver. I traveled there with Michael, whose presence provided both emotional support and witness to family dynamics I had described, but he had never observed. "Remember," he said in our hotel room before the meeting, "you've established the terms of engagement. You can modify or end this experiment at any point." The restaurant I had selected offered private dining rooms, ensuring our conversation wouldn't be overheard. I deliberately arrived 15 minutes early to establish physical positioning that felt secure, with Michael beside me and clear access to exits. My parents entered precisely at the agreed time, followed by Ashley. The awkwardness of physical presence after years of separation manifested in aborted movements. My mother's instinct to hug halted by remembrance of boundaries. My father's handshake offered then withdrawn when I maintained distance. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," my father began once we were seated, his typical authoritative tone notably absent. "We understand this is entirely on your terms." "We've missed you terribly," my mother added, emotion tightening her voice. "Not knowing if you were safe was the hardest part." "I was always safe," I replied evenly. I made a decision to protect myself from a situation that had become untenable. The gambling debt ultimatum, my father acknowledged, surprising me with direct reference to the precipitating incident. "I handled that badly. Very badly." This unprecedented admission, my father acknowledging error without qualification or deflection, created an opening for substantive conversation rather than performative reconciliation. For the next 2 hours, we engaged in the most honest exchange of our family history, facilitated by the neutral location and the foundation of limited contact that preceded it. My father spoke about recognizing how differently he had treated his daughters, the unconscious reinforcement of irresponsibility in Ashley, and the burden of expectation placed on me. "I justified it as responding to your different personalities," he admitted. "But I see now how we created and enforced those differences from the beginning." My mother, less analytically inclined but equally reflective, acknowledged her enabling role. "I confused protection with love," she said, dabbing at tears. "I thought I was being a good mother by shielding Ashley from consequences, but I was actually preventing her from growing up." Ashley's contribution proved most surprising. "When you disappeared, I was furious," she admitted. "I blamed you entirely and painted myself as the victim. It took months of therapy and GA meetings to recognize how I'd manipulated everyone, especially you." She paused, visibly gathering courage. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I see it now, how unfair the family dynamic was and how much it hurt you." Michael, who had remained silent but attentive throughout, later described witnessing 3 people experiencing the uncomfortable sensation of examining their behavior honestly for perhaps the first time. As our meeting concluded, I clarified that while this conversation represented meaningful progress, complete reconciliation would require sustained change rather than momentary insight. "I've built a life that works for me," I explained. "Any relationship moving forward needs to enhance that life, not diminish it." My father, who once would have perceived such a statement as rejection, simply nodded. "We understand. Whatever relationship you're willing to offer is more than we had yesterday." Over the following months, we maintained the established communication pattern, weekly emails, monthly video calls, with gradual relaxation of certain boundaries. I shared my career advancement without specifying my employer. I introduced topics previously considered taboo, like my parents' enabling patterns and the family's unhealthy dynamics around money. Rather than defensive rejection, these observations increasingly met with thoughtful reflection. During our second in-person meeting, held 6 months after the first, I finally revealed I had rebuilt my life in Denver. This disclosure followed significant deliberation and consultation with both Michael and my therapist, who agreed sufficient trust had been established to share general location without specific address details. My father, who once might have immediately planned an unannounced visit, simply acknowledged the information with respect for its significance. "Thank you for trusting us with that. We won't abuse that knowledge." The most profound lesson from my 3-year disappearance and subsequent controlled reconnection wasn't about my family's capacity for change, though that proved greater than anticipated. Rather, the essential insight concerned my own transformation from accommodating enabler to self-respecting adult with clear boundaries. I learned that true family respects boundaries rather than viewing them as obstacles to overcome or temporary inconveniences to be endured until normal exploitation resumes. The endless accommodations I had made throughout my 20s weren't expressions of love, but manifestations of fear of rejection, conflict, and abandonment that kept me trapped in dysfunction. I discovered that self-preservation isn't selfishness. The financial independence I had protected through my dramatic departure had enabled not just material security, but psychological sovereignty. By refusing to sacrifice my financial stability for my sister's gambling addiction, I had inadvertently created space for her to develop responsibility previously untapped. Perhaps most significantly, I recognized how financial independence enables emotional independence. My ability to walk away completely, to disappear without warning rested on the foundation of career skills, savings discipline, and credit-worthiness I had established. Without these resources, boundary enforcement would have remained theoretical rather than actionable. I understood that sometimes distance is necessary for health. The complete severance I maintained for 3 years provided essential space for both personal healing and family recalibration. While permanent estrangement proved unnecessary in my specific situation, the willingness to maintain it indefinitely created leverage for meaningful change that gentler approaches had failed to produce. Most practically, I learned that we set precedents for how others treat us through what we tolerate. By removing myself entirely from established dynamics, I created opportunity to establish new patterns based on respect rather than exploitation. Each maintained boundary reinforced my non-negotiable requirements for engagement. For years after my departure from Chicago, Michael proposed during a mountain hike that had become our Saturday tradition. As we planned our small ceremony, the question of family involvement prompted thoughtful consideration rather than automatic inclusion. They've shown consistent change, I acknowledged during a therapy session focused on wedding planning. But that doesn't automatically earn them central roles in this significant life event. Ultimately, I invited my parents and Ashley to attend the ceremony as guests rather than participants, welcome to witness, but not orchestrate or define this chapter of my life. Their gracious acceptance of these parameters confirmed the genuine nature of their evolution. My promotion to CFO at the property management company coincided with our engagement, creating professional fulfillment alongside personal joy. The owner's decision to expand operations provided opportunity to implement financial systems I had envisioned since joining the firm. Family contact stabilized into monthly video calls and quarterly in-person visits, either at neutral locations or, eventually, hosting my parents at our Denver home for defined periods. These interactions, while never entirely free from echoes of past dynamics, maintained sufficient health to justify continued engagement. Ashley's recovery journey progressed with expected fluctuations. A brief relapse during her 3rd year of sobriety prompted renewed commitment to her program. Unlike past crises, she addressed this setback without financial demands or dramatic appeals, handling consequences independently. While our relationship would never recapture the mythical closeness my mother had fabricated during my absence, Ashley and I developed something potentially more valuable. Authentic connection based on adult respect rather than assigned roles of responsible protector and perpetual protected. My journey from exploitation to empowerment ultimately transcended family boundaries to influence all areas of life. The willingness to enforce non-negotiable standards, even at significant personal cost, transformed my approach to every relationship and opportunity. Looking back from where I stand today, married to Michael, advancing in a fulfilling career, maintaining carefully structured family contact, the contrast with my former life seems almost unimaginable. The terrified woman who drove away from Chicago with nothing but essentials and determination has evolved into someone I'm genuinely proud to be. If you're watching this and recognizing your own family patterns in my story, please know that boundaries aren't selfish, they're necessary for genuine love and respect to flourish. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for both yourself and others is to refuse participation in harmful dynamics, even if that refusal requires radical action. I don't regret my disappearance. The 3 years of complete separation created space for healing that gentler approaches had failed to provide. While such extreme measures may not be necessary in every situation, the courage to protect your peace remains essential regardless of the specific boundaries required. Have you ever had to set a difficult boundary with family or loved ones? What helped you maintain it despite pressure to return to old patterns? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe for more authentic conversations about family dynamics and personal growth. Remember, you deserve relationships that enhance rather than diminish your life. And sometimes creating those relationships requires courage to walk away from those that don't. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you strength in your own.